Days turned into weeks, and slowly the noise around Keanu Reeves's quiet exit from The View began to fade. News programs stopped showing the clip, social media moved on to other topics, and new celebrity stories took over the headlines. But for many people, what had happened that day stayed in their hearts. Keanu kept living his simple life. Every morning, he woke up early and took a quiet walk through the neighborhood before the streets became busy. People who recognized him smiled kindly but gave him space, which he appreciated. He visited the same small cafes and bookstores, always polite, always gentle. He spoke softly to those who approached him, signing autographs or taking photos without any show or fuss. His friends noticed that he seemed peaceful again, even though the world had made such a big deal about the interview. One evening, while sitting at a quiet restaurant, a friend asked him gently, "Keanu, does it bother you that everyone keeps talking about that moment?" Keanu smiled warmly and shook his head. "No," he said. "People will talk. But what matters to me is how I choose to act." I walked away because it was the right thing to do. I didn't want to fight or argue. I just wanted to leave with kindness. His friend nodded and smiled too. It was simple, but Keanu's answer made sense. It was exactly who he was, a man who lived by simple, quiet principles. While Keanu stayed calm, things at The View were still not completely normal. Ratings had dropped a little, and viewers continued to send letters and emails about that day. Many said they missed the feeling of respect and kindness in interviews. Some stopped watching the show altogether. Even though Behar had made a brief comment about respecting Keanu, many people felt it wasn't enough. Joy herself kept thinking about it too. When she walked down the street, people sometimes stopped her, not to talk about politics or entertainment like before, but to ask about Keanu. Some even told her that they admired how he handled himself and wished interviews on TV could feel that kind again. Those comments stayed with Joy. Late at night, she sat quietly in her home, thinking about how long she had worked as a host. She thought about all the interviews she had done, all the time she had asked tough questions. But Keanu's reaction had taught her something important, that sometimes kindness matters more than getting answers. That sometimes a quiet, gentle approach could leave a bigger impact than a sharp question ever could. Keanu didn't know what Joy was thinking, and he didn't need to know. In his heart, he had already let go of that day. He hadn't walked away from the interview to prove a point or win an argument. He walked away because he felt that staying would not help anyone, not the viewers, not the hosts, and not himself. His quiet exit had simply been his way of saying, enough, without anger. Then something interesting happened. A few weeks later, a new talk show invited Keanu for an interview. The producer called his agent and promised that this interview would be different, respectful, gentle, and kind. They said they wanted to talk about his work, his projects, and his thoughts on life, not his private pain. Keanu thought about it quietly. He wasn't sure if he wanted to return to TV so soon, but he could feel that this was a good opportunity to show that it was possible to have a respectful conversation. So he agreed. When he arrived at the studio for the new show, the atmosphere felt warm and welcoming. The host smiled kindly, thanked him for coming, and promised to keep the questions thoughtful. As the cameras rolled, Keanu spoke softly and honestly. He shared stories about his new film, his love for motorcycles, and the books that inspired him. He even laughed gently when the host asked about small, funny moments from his life. There were no harsh questions, no sharp comments, no uncomfortable moments. The audience listened closely and clapped warmly. After the show aired, many viewers wrote online that they felt happy and peaceful after watching. They said it was refreshing to see a calm, kind conversation on TV. Keanu felt happy too. This was the kind of interview he believed in, simple, honest, and respectful. When he left the studio, he thanked everyone quietly and went back to his normal life. In the days that followed, some news stories compared the two interviews. one full of tension and sharp questions, the other full of peace and warmth. Many people said they preferred the gentle approach. They hoped that more TV shows would learn from this and treat guests kindly. Joy Behar saw those stories too. She read comments from viewers who said they felt touched by the peaceful interview. She couldn't help but smile softly. Even though she hadn't planned for things to happen this way, she realized that Keanu had taught everyone, including herself, a valuable lesson. As time passed, life returned to normal for most people. But the memory of Keanu's quiet strength remained. For many fans, that moment when he stood up, thanked everyone politely, and walked away became a symbol of dignity. Keanu himself stayed the same. He kept living simply, kept treating everyone. He met with kindness, kept choosing peace. He didn't seek attention or fame for how he had handled that day. He simply continued being himself. And in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the headlines, not the viral clips, not the debates, but the quiet example of a man who chose respect, even when it wasn't shown to him. Even Joy Behar couldn't escape the attention. Every day, she faced questions about the incident. Reporters asked if she planned to apologize properly. Fans of The View emailed the network, saying they felt uncomfortable with how Joy had acted. Some said they wouldn't watch the show again unless Joy addressed what happened more sincerely. Joy sat in her dressing room between shows, reading these messages. At first, she felt defensive. She believed she had just done her job asking tough questions. But as the days passed, she thought more deeply. She watched the clip of Keanu walking away again and again. She remembered his quiet eyes, his calm words, and the way he didn't fight back but simply left. For the first time, she wondered if maybe she had been too harsh, not just with him, but in many interviews over the years. She thought about what it meant to interview someone with kindness instead of sharpness. Maybe she had lost sight of that. Maybe it was time for her to change. Keanu, meanwhile, stayed quiet but thoughtful. One evening, sitting on his balcony, he received a message from one of the producers at The View. It was short but genuine. The producer thanked him for being graceful, even when things became uncomfortable, and said the whole team was reflecting on what happened. They didn't ask him to come back on the show. They didn't ask for a statement. It was just a note of quiet respect. Keanu smiled softly as he read the message. He didn't feel angry at anyone. He had walked away not because he wanted to punish anyone, but because he needed to protect his peace. He believed that walking away kindly was better than staying and creating a scene. As he put his phone down, he thought about how the world was changing. Social media made everything loud, fast, and sometimes cruel. But maybe this moment, his quiet walkout, had reminded people that there was still power in grace, in kindness, in simply choosing not to fight. Over the next few days, the noise around the story slowly began to fade. Other news stories took over. Other celebrities made headlines. But something lasting remained. Many people who watched that moment felt inspired by Keanu's example. They talked about it with friends, at dinner tables, in offices. They said things like, "Did you see how calm he was?" And he didn't even argue, he just left with respect. Some people even said they wanted to be more like Keanu in their own lives, to stay calm when provoked, to walk away from situations that felt unkind, to choose peace over conflict. Joy felt that shift too. A few days later, she spoke briefly on the show again. This time, her tone was softer. She didn't give a long apology, but she admitted that she had been thinking a lot about that day. She said, "Sometimes we all need to reflect on how we speak to others. I think that's what I've learned this week." Her words weren't perfect, but they felt honest. The audience clapped gently, not loudly, but with understanding. They could feel that something had changed. Keanu didn't watch that episode. He was outside, enjoying a quiet walk through a park. A few fans recognized him but gave him space, smiling politely instead of rushing up to him. He appreciated that more than any words. He felt at peace, knowing that he had handled himself the best way he could. As the sun set, Keanu sat on a park bench, feeling the cool air on his face. He thought about how sometimes you didn't have to say much at all to make an impact. Sometimes silence, dignity, and kindness spoke louder than any argument or loud reaction. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. The world would keep spinning, full of noise and stories. But he had stayed true to who he was. And for Keanu, that was all that mattered. The story about Keanu Reeves walking off The View might have started to fade from headlines, but for many people, it stayed in their minds. Fans kept talking about how calmly he handled everything, and some even said it changed how they wanted to act in their own lives. Many began sharing stories about times when they stayed calm instead of arguing, using Keanu's moment as inspiration. Keanu, however, didn't care much about the attention. After a few quiet days at home, he returned to his normal routines. He visited the local bookstore where the staff knew him well. They greeted him kindly but didn't mention what happened on television. They knew Keanu liked peace and privacy, and they respected that. While browsing books, a small child approached him shyly, holding a notebook. The child's mother stood nearby, smiling gently. The child asked softly, "Mr. Reeves, can I draw you? I saw you on TV and my mom says you're really kind." Keanu smiled warmly. He knelt down to the child's level and said, "Of course, I would be honored." He sat patiently while the child quickly sketched him, showing his usual humble kindness, even in such a simple moment. Meanwhile, Behar was having a different experience. At work, things didn't feel normal anymore. Even though The View continued with new topics and new guests, the atmosphere felt heavier. The producers held a private meeting with the hosts, talking about how they could improve future interviews. They didn't mention Keanu directly, but everyone in the room understood that what had happened with him had changed things. Joy herself felt unsettled. She didn't like feeling criticized, but deep inside she knew the criticism wasn't unfair. She thought a lot about how she had handled that interview. She remembered the way Keanu looked at her with gentle but firm eyes as he calmly stood and left. He hadn't shouted or argued, but his actions said everything. Joy realized that moment had taught her something important, that being a strong interviewer didn't mean being unkind. She spent the next few evenings at home, thinking about her long career. She read some of the thoughtful letters viewers sent her, letters not filled with hate, but with gentle reminders about kindness and respect. These letters touched her more than she expected. Maybe it wasn't too late to learn, to change. At the same time, Keanu's quiet message on social media continued to spread. People shared his short statement, "I believe in treating people with respect and walking away from what does not feel kind," over and over. Some printed the words and pinned them on their office walls. Teachers talked about it in classrooms. Even businesses used the quote in their newsletters about dignity and respect. Keanu's single quotes, simple decision to leave quietly had started a quiet but meaningful movement. It wasn't loud like most trends online. It was soft, thoughtful, and full of kindness, just like Keanu himself. One evening, a friend invited Keanu to a charity event. Keanu usually avoided big events, but this time he agreed. He thought it would be a good way to return gently to public life. The event was for a children's hospital, a cause close to his heart. When he arrived, many people there smiled kindly at him. No one asked about The View. They just thanked him for being there and for supporting the children. During the event, one of the organizers approached him quietly. She told him that because of his recent actions, many people had donated generously to the hospital. "People say your calmness inspired them," she said. "They felt moved by how you stayed kind even when hurt. You made people think about being better." Keanu felt deeply touched. This was the kind of attention he could accept, the kind that helped others. He gave a small speech at the event, thanking everyone who donated. His words were simple and sincere. "We're all going through something," he said softly. "And sometimes the best thing we can do is treat each other gently." His speech received gentle applause, not loud or wild, but full of warmth. People felt connected to him, not as a Hollywood star, but as a human being who understood pain, kindness, and dignity. Back at the View, Joy decided she needed to say something more meaningful. The next day, as the show began, she spoke directly to the camera for a moment before introducing the first guest. "I've been thinking a lot about respect," she said quietly. "And I want to say, I admire Keanu Reeves for how he handled himself. I learned from that moment, and I hope we all can." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. Some viewers appreciated it. Others felt it was too late. But at least Joy had taken a step, even a small one. Keanu didn't watch that episode either. At the time it aired, he was out for a quiet motorcycle ride along the coast. The wind felt cool and fresh, and the sea sparkled under the sunlight. He felt peaceful again, away from cameras, away from noise. He didn't need to hear Joy's words to forgive her. He had already let go of that day long ago in his heart. He believed that walking away kindly had been the right thing to do. And now, as the road stretched ahead of him, he felt free, ready to move forward with grace, as he always tried to do. Maybe it was different because Keanu was different. He wasn't like other guests who argued back or became defensive. He stayed peaceful and calm, even when hurt. That made his decision to leave even more powerful. It made her words seem even sharper, even colder. Outside her door, producers knocked gently, asking if she wanted to speak about what happened. She stayed quiet for a moment before replying, "Not now." Meanwhile, social media kept buzzing. Clips of Keanu's exit were everywhere on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. People were sharing their thoughts, praising his quiet strength, and criticizing the show for being insensitive. News channels quickly picked up the story. They played the video of Keanu standing up, thanking the hosts politely, and walking off stage. They showed slow-motion clips of the moment he paused and took a breath before leaving. Commentators debated what it all meant. Was Joy out of line? Was this a sign that TV interviews needed to change? As night fell, the city lights reflected in Keanu's car window. He finally picked up his phone and replied to one of the messages from a close friend. He wrote only a few words. "I'm okay. Just needed to leave." That was all he needed to say. His friend replied instantly with a simple, "We're proud of you." Keanu smiled softly. Even though the day had been hard, he felt peace knowing he had stayed true to himself. He had not raised his voice, not lost his temper. He had simply walked away when he felt it was right. In that moment, Keanu knew that this story would soon fade from the news. People would move on, as they always did. But for those who watched it happen, for those who felt the emotion in that quiet exit, it would stay in their minds as a reminder that kindness and dignity still matter, even in a noisy world. The news about Keanu Reeves walking off The View spread fast. By the time evening came, almost every major news channel was talking about it. Some reporters called it a shocking TV moment. Others called it a rare show of grace and dignity. But everyone agreed on one thing: Keanu's quiet exit had made a huge impact. Fans around the world shared the clip over and over online. They wrote long posts about how much they respected Keanu. They said he was a rare person in Hollywood, someone who didn't care about fame or attention, but lived with kindness and peace. Hashtags about him filled Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Everywhere people were saying the same thing: Keanu handled that with such grace. Keanu, meanwhile, stayed quiet. After he left the studio, he went home, avoiding reporters waiting outside his building. Inside his apartment, he finally felt safe. His home was simple and calm, just like him. He made himself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and looked out at the city lights. He didn't even turn on the TV to watch the news about himself. He had no interest in seeing what people were saying. He knew what had happened, and that was enough for him. But while he stayed quiet, the world outside was loud. The next morning, some TV hosts defended Joy Behar. They said she was just doing her job, asking tough questions. They said Keanu should have expected that kind of interview. Others disagreed. They said Joy went too far, that she should have shown more kindness, especially knowing the pain Keanu had lived through. Even inside the View studio, there were quiet arguments. Some staff members felt that Joy had crossed a line. Others said the show's style had always been direct and sharp, and this was nothing new. But one thing was clear, no one could stop talking about what had happened. Joy herself stayed quiet. That morning, she didn't post on social media, didn't respond to reporters, didn't give any interviews. Inside, she was thinking deeply about what had happened. She kept remembering the look on Keanu's face before he left. He wasn't angry or rude. He didn't shout or argue. But his sad eyes, the way he softly said, "Thank you," and then left, it all stayed with her. She started reading some of the thoughtful comments online. People shared how much Keanu meant to them. Some told their own stories of grief and loss, and how much they appreciated that he had stayed kind despite all his pain. These messages made Joy think maybe she had been too harsh. Maybe she had treated him like just another celebrity instead of as a human being. At the same time, Keanu's friends began to reach out privately. Some of his closest friends sent him texts, checking on him, offering support. A few of them said they felt proud of how he had handled the situation. Others told him he had done the right thing by leaving when the questions became too personal. Keanu read these messages quietly. He didn't reply to many of them, but he felt comforted knowing that people understood him. He didn't want to be part of a fight or a scandal. He just wanted to move on, to go back to living his peaceful life. But moving on wasn't easy now. Paparazzi followed him everywhere for the next few days. Reporters waited outside places he usually visited. Even when he went for a quiet walk, cameras followed him, shouting questions about what had happened on The View. He didn't answer them. He just kept walking, his face calm but distant. Inside his mind, Keanu was already thinking about what to do next. He knew he didn't want to talk about the incident in public. He didn't want to give interviews or explain himself. But he also felt that maybe he should say something simple, just to calm things down. He decided to write a short message. One evening, after dinner, he sat down and typed a note on his phone. The message was short and clear. "Thank you to everyone for your kindness. I believe in treating people with respect and walking away from what does not feel kind. I wish peace for everyone involved." He posted it quietly on his social media. There were no long explanations, no angry words. Just a gentle message that reflected exactly who he was. The post quickly went viral. People praised him even more for staying graceful and calm. But even as the world talked about his words, Keanu went back to his peaceful routines. He visited a small bookstore near his home. He spent time with a close friend over coffee. He worked quietly on his next film project. He didn't talk about the incident at all. Meanwhile, The View faced growing criticism. Their next few episodes had lower ratings than usual. Many viewers said they felt uncomfortable watching after what had happened. Some even stopped watching the show altogether, saying it no longer felt respectful or kind. Joy Behar finally spoke a few days later. She gave a short statement at the start of the show. She didn't apologize directly but said, "Sometimes tough interviews touch a nerve. I respect Keanu Reeves and wish him well." Her words felt flat to many viewers. They wanted a real apology. But Joy didn't say more. Keanu didn't reply to her statement. He simply stayed silent, letting his Graceful exit and quiet message speak for themselves. He believed that actions spoke louder than words. And by walking away from that uncomfortable interview with kindness and peace, he had shown the world exactly who he was, a man who chose respect over conflict. No matter what. The days passed, but people still talked about what had happened. On The View. Everywhere Keanu Reeves went, fans smiled kindly at him. Strangers stopped him on the street just to say they respected how he handled himself. He felt their warmth, but he didn't need their praise. He lived simply and quietly as always, even as the world kept turning his peaceful exit into a big story. In cafes, people whispered about Behar's sharp questions. On social media, the conversation kept going strong. Some defended Joy, saying she was just doing her job. But many more supported Keanu, calling him a class act. Even people who had never paid much attention to him before now admired the way he calmly walked away without anger or drama. Keanu noticed all of this from a distance. He didn't want attention. He didn't give interviews or comment again. Instead, he spent his days doing things that brought him peace. He rode his motorcycle through quiet streets early in the morning when no one was watching. He visited small bookstores and coffee shops where people respected his space. He worked on his next film project, focused on his craft, but no matter how quietly he lived, the world around him didn't stay quiet. Entertainment news shows kept showing clips of his exit. Talk show hosts discussed whether celebrity interviews had become too harsh, whether guests should be treated with more kindness. People wrote articles about how Keanu's gentle dignity had shown a better way to handle conflict. Keanu walked quickly but calmly as he left the stage. His footsteps were almost silent, but everyone in the studio felt them deeply. Behind him, the host sat frozen, unsure what to say. The audience sat still too, some holding their breath. What had just happened felt shocking, but also strangely peaceful. Keanu had not raised his voice, not argued, but had made a clear decision to leave. The cameras quickly cut away from the empty seat he left behind. Producers whispered urgently to each other, some suggesting a commercial break, others saying to keep filming because this was television history in the making. Whoopi Goldberg finally spoke to the audience, trying to fill the silence. She made a light joke to ease the tension, but her usual charm didn't work this time. No one laughed. The moment was too heavy. Behar sat back in her chair, looking thoughtful but also a little shaken. She smiled awkwardly and said, "Well, that was unexpected." Her words felt small now, after what had just happened. She glanced toward the exit where Keanu had gone, but he was gone from sight. Backstage, Keanu moved quietly through the hallway. A producer rushed after him, gently calling his name, asking him if he would return to the show, saying they could fix things, saying they didn't mean for it to get so personal. Keanu stopped walking for a moment. He turned to look at the producer. His face was calm again, but tired. "Thank you," he said simply, "but I'm done for today." Those few words made it clear that he was not angry, but he was hurt. He didn't want to stay in a place where his private pain had been treated like gossip. He walked out of the building, stepping into the bright sunlight outside. Cameras flashed as paparazzi outside quickly gathered, sensing that something big had just happened. They shouted questions at him. "Keanu, why did you leave? What did Joy say to you? Are you upset?" But Keanu didn't answer. He simply kept walking, his expression calm and private as always. Inside the studio, the hosts of The View tried to recover. One host began reading from the teleprompter as if nothing had happened, but even the audience could see their unease. The energy of the show was gone now. Everything felt different. Viewers at home were already reaching for their phones, posting about what they had just seen. Clips of Keanu calmly standing up and walking away spread fast. Within minutes, #Keanu leaves and #respect Keanu began trending on social media. People watching online were shocked but also moved. Many praised Keanu. for staying so polite even when he was being treated unfairly. They wrote posts about how much respect they had for him. Some shared their own stories of loss and grief, saying they understood why he didn't want to speak about private pain on live television. Other people online criticized Joy Behar for pushing him too far. They said she crossed a line by turning a friendly interview into something hurtful. Social media was now full of opinions, debates, and praise for Keanu's grace and dignity. At the same time, news websites rushed to publish headlines about what had happened. Articles appeared with titles like "Keanu Reeves storms off live TV" and "Awkward moment on The View as Keanu exits interview early." Some sites showed screenshots of the moment Keanu stood up, capturing the quiet strength on his face. Keanu, meanwhile, had reached his car. His driver opened the door for him without asking any questions. The driver knew Keanu well enough to understand when silence was needed. Keanu sat quietly in the back seat as the car pulled away from the studio. He looked out the window, watching the city pass by, his mind full of thoughts but his face peaceful. He thought about what had just happened, not with regret or anger, but with sadness. He had gone on the show to talk about a film, to share something creative and positive. But instead, he had found himself in a conversation that felt like an attack on his soul. But even now, he felt no desire to speak badly about anyone, he believed in kindness, even when kindness was not shown to him. This belief was what had guided him all his life. It was why fans loved him, not just as an actor, but as a human being. Back at the studio, Joy sat quietly during the next segment of the show. She seemed distracted, her usual sharp humor gone. She scrolled through her phone during a commercial break, seeing the reactions online. Many comments were critical of her, calling her insensitive, saying she had gone too far. Others defended her, saying it was her job to ask tough questions. But even Joy could feel that this moment was different. She knew this would follow her for days, maybe weeks. The audience inside the studio left at the end of the show still whispering about Keanu's exit. No one was talking about the other guests or segments. All anyone could talk about was Keanu, how calm he was, how graceful, how human. Outside, as Keanu's car moved through traffic, his phone buzzed quietly with messages from friends and colleagues. Many were checking on him, sending him kind words. Some simply said they were proud of how he handled himself. Keanu looked at the messages but didn't reply right away. He needed time to think, to breathe. He felt peace returning slowly. He knew that by walking away calmly, he had spoken louder than any argument ever could. The city lights began to glow as evening approached. Keanu leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes for a moment. No matter what people said online or on television, he felt sure he had done the right thing. He had stayed true to himself. And that, to Keanu, mattered more than anything. Inside the studio, Joy Behar sat quietly at the round table. Her usual loud energy was missing. She kept looking down at her phone, seeing the social media storm that had started. Comments were pouring in fast, and most of them were not kind to her. People were calling her rude, insensitive, and cruel. They were praising Keanu for staying so calm and kind, even when he was being pushed with painful questions. The other hosts on the show tried to move on. They smiled and introduced the next segment, but it was clear that their minds were elsewhere. Everyone in the room felt it. The interview with Keanu had left a mark. It wasn't just another awkward TV moment. It felt real, raw, and emotional. Backstage, the producers were talking in hushed voices. Some of them were worried about the fallout. They knew that what had happened would make headlines, but they also knew that many viewers might feel upset with the show. One of them whispered, "Maybe we should reach out to Keanu. Apologize, fix this somehow." Joy's face stayed tight with a small forced smile as the show continued. But inside she was feeling something she didn't expect: regret. She didn't usually care when interviews got tense. She thought tough questions were part of her job. But something about this felt different. She remembered the way Keanu had stayed calm, the way his sad but peaceful eyes met hers, and the way he gently left without a harsh word. It made her feel uneasy, almost guilty. Meanwhile, outside the studio, news reporters were already gathering. Cameras were pointed at the exit, waiting to catch any statement from the hosts or staff. Fans and curious people crowded near the doors, holding up their phones to record, hoping to catch a glimpse of anyone who could explain what had just happened. Keanu's car moved quietly through the busy city streets. Inside, Keanu sat back, looking out the window. The city seemed loud, full of noise and lights, but inside the car, there was a quiet peace. His driver didn't ask questions. He knew that Keanu needed space. Keanu thought about what Joy had said to him. Her words had cut deep, even though he had hidden that pain from the cameras. He thought about all the losses he had faced in his life, the grief he had carried quietly for so many years. He had learned to live with sadness without letting it show too much. It was his way of surviving. But today felt different. Joy's questions had opened old wounds. She had spoken about things that were deeply personal, things that didn't belong in a TV interview. Yet, even now, Keanu felt no anger toward her. He just felt tired. Tired of being treated like a story instead of a person. At the same time, he was also surprised by the reaction from people online. He had always tried to live quietly, without seeking attention. But now, thousands of strangers were defending him, calling him graceful and kind. Their words felt warm, like a soft light. In a dark moment, back in the studio, as the show ended, the atmosphere stayed tense. Joy packed up her notes and left the table quickly. She didn't stay to talk to the other hosts like she usually did. She walked straight to her dressing room and closed the door behind her. Sitting alone, she opened her phone again and scrolled through the endless comments. There were angry messages but also thoughtful ones. Some people reminded her that celebrities have feelings too, that even someone as famous as Keanu deserves respect and kindness. Joy sighed deeply. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure if she had gone too far. She thought about apologizing, but part of her also felt stubborn. After all, she had done this kind of interview many times before. Why was this one different? Keanu Reeves stepped into the bright studio lights of The View. The crowd clapped loudly as he smiled politely and waved, his calm and humbled nature clear to everyone watching. He looked different from most stars who visited this show. His quiet, peaceful energy stood out even more against the loud voices of the hosts. As he sat down, Whoopi Goldberg gave him a warm welcome, thanking him for coming and saying how much she admired his work. Keanu nodded gently, thanking her in return, speaking in his usual soft, thoughtful way. The other hosts jumped in with questions. They asked about his new movie, his love for motorcycles, and how he stayed so down to earth despite being such a big Hollywood star. Keanu answered kindly and honestly, with small smiles and simple words. He spoke about how much he appreciated life, how he tried to live each day in a kind way, and how important it was for him to help others quietly, without needing attention or praise. The audience listened carefully, many smiling as he spoke. Even through the TV cameras, his honesty and warmth could be felt. His words seemed to touch people's hearts. Everyone watching at home would feel this too. Keanu seemed truly grateful for life, even after all the hard times he had been through. For the first few minutes, everything felt positive. The conversation flowed easily. The hosts laughed at some of his gentle jokes. The crowd clapped again when he talked about a children's charity he quietly supported. The feeling in the studio was light and joyful, but then something shifted. Joy Behar leaned forward in her chair, her smile tightening just a little. She asked a question that made Keanu pause. "Keanu, you seem so peaceful. But do you think it's all just an act? Maybe you're hiding something behind that calm face, maybe sadness or guilt?" Keanu's soft smile faded for a moment. He tilted his head slightly, as if thinking about how to answer carefully. His fingers tapped gently on the armrest. He finally spoke, his voice still quiet but slower now. He said that he believed everyone has private pain, and he had faced his own losses, but he preferred to live with grace and not let grief define him. He spoke carefully, with respect, but the tension could be felt now. There was a change in the air. Joy pressed on. But really, don't you think fans deserve to know the truth about you? Why so private? Are you running from something? Keanu's gaze lowered briefly. For the audience at home, this moment would feel awkward, like watching something personal happen where it shouldn't. The other hosts looked uncomfortable too, glancing at each other as Joy's questions became sharper. The live audience grew quieter, sensing that this wasn't just a casual chat anymore. Some fans looked confused, others leaned forward in their seats, curious where this would go. Keanu gave a gentle sigh. He looked back at Joy, meeting her gaze directly. Then he smiled. Softly again, but this time it seemed sadder. "I think people deserve kindness," he said simply. That's all. The words were beautiful but also carried a weight. They sounded like a final line, a subtle hint that this conversation was close to going too far. The cameras caught every detail. The way Keanu's expression shifted from peaceful to serious and back again. The way the audience began to sense that something was wrong. And the way Joy's face hardened, clearly ready to push further. But even here, Keanu remained calm. He didn't snap or raise his voice. Instead, he simply adjusted in his seat, his shoulders straightening slightly as if preparing for what might come next. For viewers watching on TV, this was already an emotional moment. It wasn't just a celebrity interview anymore. It was real, raw, and human. People would start wondering, would Keanu open up about his private pain? Would he stay peaceful? Or would this interview take a turn no one expected? Even the crew behind the cameras sensed it. This was turning into a moment that could go viral. Producers whispered to each other quietly, trying to decide whether to cut to a break or let this play out. The lights above the set felt hotter now. The audience sat in almost total silence, waiting, not knowing that what was about to happen would soon become headline news all over social media and entertainment websites. Still, through all of it, Keanu kept his voice gentle and his posture calm, but inside, something had shifted. Something deeper. A boundary had quietly been crossed, and everyone watching could feel that this polite conversation was no longer just polite. What would happen next? No one knew. But one thing was clear already. This was not going to be just another celebrity interview. Keanu sat quietly as the air around him grew heavier. Though he smiled politely, inside he felt something had changed. Joy Behar leaned in again, her voice a little sharper, her eyes fixed on him, waiting for him to react. The audience stayed silent, sensing the shift in mood. Even the other hosts looked uneasy now, their smiles fading. Joy asked another question. That felt like a challenge. "Keanu, you always act so calm and quiet. Do you think that's real? Or is it just something you show the world? Maybe you're hiding who you really are." Her words hung in the air, sharp and cold. Keanu paused before answering, taking a slow breath. His eyes softened, but a flicker of pain crossed his face. He kept his voice gentle as he replied, "I try to live my life with kindness. Everyone has struggles. I think it's better to treat others gently. That's all." His answer was simple and respectful, but Joy did not stop. She pressed on, asking about his past losses, bringing up painful parts of his life that most interviewers avoided. "But aren't you still haunted by all those tragedies? Don't you think you should talk about them openly? Maybe people deserve to hear the truth from you," she said. The room felt colder. The audience shifted in their seats. Some frowned, others looked uncomfortable. A few whispered quietly. This wasn't what they expected. Keanu stayed still, listening, but the hurt was clear in his eyes now. He spoke again, choosing his words. Carefully, I have experienced loss, yes. But I don't think this is the right place to talk about all that pain. I want to honor those memories quietly. His calm tone only made Joy lean in more. She smiled, but it was a tight, uncomfortable smile. Well, maybe it's time to stop being so quiet, Keanu, she said. Maybe your fans want the real you, not this peaceful act. Those words hit harder than the audience expected. There was a murmur, a gasp from somewhere in the crowd. Everyone could feel it now. Joy had crossed a line. The other hosts looked at Joy, then at Keanu, unsure what to say. Whoopi Goldberg glanced at the camera, then at the producers, as if asking whether they should cut to a commercial break. But the producers stayed silent too, watching closely. They knew something big was happening, a moment that could make headlines. Keanu sat still, but inside his heart was pounding. His fingers pressed gently on the armrest, almost as if holding himself together. He looked at Joy carefully, meeting her gaze directly. The audience watched every small movement, Keanu's slow breath, the way his shoulders straightened just slightly, the sadness in his eyes. But still, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just stayed calm. Then Joy pushed even further. You know, some people think your kindness is fake, that you just act nice so people will love you. What would you say to that? Her words felt cruel now, almost like she wanted him to break. Keanu took another deep breath. The silence between them grew heavier. Then he spoke softly but firmly. I think people can believe what they want. I know who I am. And I choose to be kind, no matter what people say. His voice was still calm, but there was strength behind it. The way he said those words made it clear he was drawing a line, a quiet but powerful boundary. The audience felt it too. There was no loud applause, just quiet respect. Joy leaned back in her chair, her smile faltering for the first time. Maybe she realized she had gone too far, maybe not. But the moment had changed. Keanu's single quotes' face softened again, but there was a new look in his eyes. It was the look of someone who had been hurt but refused to respond with anger. The look of someone who had learned long ago to stay peaceful even when others tried to pull him into conflict. Then something surprising happened. The audience, sensing his grace, began to clap softly, slowly at first, then louder. It was not the usual loud cheer, but a respectful applause, an applause for his dignity and strength. Keanu nodded gently, accepting the moment, but he also knew he couldn't stay much longer. He felt tired, not just physically but emotionally. Joy's words had reminded him of old wounds he preferred to keep private, and he didn't want to sit there and pretend everything was fine anymore. He looked at the hosts, then at the audience, his smile returning but with sadness behind it. He thanked them quietly for their time. His words were simple, but meaningful. Thank you for having me here, he said. But I think it's time for me to go. The audience fell silent again. No one had expected this. The producers hesitated. Should they stop him? But it was too late. Keanu gently stood up from his chair. His movements were slow and respectful, not rushed or angry. He nodded once more to the audience, then walked calmly off the stage. The cameras followed him briefly before cutting back to the stunned hosts. Whoopi tried to smooth things over with a polite comment, but it was clear that nothing could erase what had just happened. The audience remained quiet, still processing what they had seen. At home, viewers felt the same way. Something rare had happened, something real, raw, and human. And everyone watching knew that this moment would be talked about everywhere very soon.